Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. Amen. Welcome everyone to Urho the Way for our second lecture this month on Syriac manuscripts. Today's program is entitled Highlights from a Collection of Syriac Fragments found at the Oriental Institute. We have a very interesting program today, looking at a series of important Syriac fragments now stored at the University of Chicago. These fragments gives us a look at the history of the Syriac Orthodox Community between the 6th and the 9th centuries. It is with great joy that I introduce today's guest, Reverend Dr. Sharbel Iskandar Bcheiry. And in the academic circle, he is well known as Iskandar Bcheiry. We are blessed to have Abouna in our program. Abouna Sharbel is a priest of our Syriac Orthodox Church and has been serving as a pastor of his community in Chicago since 2006 with his family. Originally from Lebanon, even from a young age, he had always wanted to serve the church, being inspired by the prayerful life of his parents. In an interview, Abouna once said, "I like to study, it is in my blood." It is then no surprise that after studying theology at the University of Holy Spirit in Lebanon, he went on to pursue 2 PhDs on church history from the Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome and another on Christian-Muslim relations from the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago. The fruits of his labors are many. Abouna Sharbel has authored a number of books on Syriac Christianity and church history. Many of these are prepared from manuscripts identified for the first time. His articles on Syriac manuscripts have been featured in a number of important journals. Abouna Sharbel is currently a Metadata Editor in the Production Department of American Theological Library Association. He is a recent Oriental Institute Museum Collection Research Grant recipient also. What I have mentioned just above is only a brief introduction to Abouna Sharbel. On behalf of our team Urho and all our viewers, I welcome Abouna Sharbel to the live session. Welcome, Abouna. Barekmor.
Barekmor, Abouna. Barekmor.
To our guests joining in this live, feel free to leave your questions in the comments that will be addressed at the end of today's session. With that, may I once again welcome Reverend Dr. Sharbel Iskandar for this session. Abouna, the floor is open for you. You can start your lecture and we are waiting for you. Barekmor.
Barekmor, Abouna, and Shlomo Ahe Ahwotho, and thank you for Urho and for the team working for Urho, with Urho, in promoting the Syriac culture, the Syriac Christianity, history. It is an honor to me, and God bless your work, and always. The topic of today is about a special collection of a fragment found and let's say discovered and rediscovered in the Oriental Institute Museum, which is part of Chicago University. And the goal is to shed light on this collection of a fragment to show the importance and certain challenges and projects in their publication. Now, what is the Oriental Institute Museum? Oriental Institute Museum was established in 1919 in Chicago as part of Chicago University. It is specialized in the history, the archaeological history in Middle East. specifically Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, east of Turkey, and Iran, Persia. It houses around 350,000 artifact pieces, beside the many collection of manuscripts in different languages and from different background and places. Now, among this collection of manuscripts, there is also a small collection of Syriac manuscripts in the Oriental Institute Museum, Chicago. We are talking here about between 12 to 14 manuscripts. It is a small collection, though it is an important collection. For example, you have a very important manuscript about the homilies that contains the homilies of Jacob of Suruj, and also about his life, and about homilies written, composed by other church fathers. And some of them still are not published. And also some of the homilies of Jacob of Suruj are a little bit particular in this manuscript and differs in some way from other manuscripts or those who were edited and published till today. Another, for example, manuscript, the work of Barhebrius, the Dove, the famous book of the Dove about the ascetical life and the spiritual life, which was published by late Patriarch Zakka. He was about 30, 40 years ago, which he was based on one of the manuscripts in our collection here in Chicago Institute, Chicago Museum. Before giving an idea and shedding light about this special small collection of a fragment, a very quick idea also about the Syriac collection in general. The Syriac collection manuscript here came from 3 different places. Few manuscripts came from Egypt. Some manuscripts came from, about 2 or 3 manuscripts came from Urmia in Iran, and the rest, the majority of the manuscripts came from southeast of Turkey, from Tur Abdin region, and we will know a little bit about the history, how this collection of manuscripts came to Chicago. The characteristic, most of the Syriac manuscripts of this collection belongs to the Syriac Orthodox tradition, and very few to the tradition of the Church of the East. We are in a process of cataloging. The process of cataloging started about 3 or 4 years ago. Meanwhile, certain pieces and topics, let's say pieces in this collection, are being published, and we are still publishing them from time to time. Now we'll come to the collection of the fragment, Syriac fragment. We'll come back. All right. Now, the story starts in 1911, when a Syriac Orthodox monk left the monastery of Za'faran in a mission of studying and examining the Syriac manuscript found in the villages of Tur Abdin. The monk Afram Barsom, who later became the patriarch of his church, he was still monk at that time. He visited many villages in Tur Abdin and examined many manuscripts and described them. And his description of this manuscript was just recently published. About 20 years ago, it was published. Among the manuscripts that Afram Barsom examined in a village called Sorino or Basabrina, which you can see it here on the map, and very close to the monastery of Mor Gabriel. Among the manuscripts there, he found an ancient manuscript on parchment, belongs to the middle of the 9th century. It was copied in the 9th century and contains an extensive collection of historical document, law, canon, church synod decisions, a huge, extensive collection, especially about law, because this manuscript was called by Afram Barsom in 2-3 places of his writing, like for example in his the history of the science of Syriac literature, or in his catalog, it was called and referred to as the Book of Basabrina, or the Canon of Basabrina, or the Manuscript of Canon of Basabrina. The manuscript originally belonged to the monastery of Mor Gabriel in Tor Abdin. And we know why it ended up in Basabrina, because Basabrina had a special relationship as village with Mor Gabriel. Through history, every monastery had a guardian village, a village that takes care of a certain monastery, defending monastery, protecting the monastery, taking care of the monastery. And Basabrina was the guardian village of Mor Gabriel. Because of that, you can find many manuscripts that were in Mor Gabriel. You can find them in Basabrina. This is the reason. Now, after the examination of Patriarch Afram Barsom of this important manuscript, 1 to 3 years after that, there was the First World War, and the manuscript, like many others, disappeared. Even Patriarch Afram Barsom means we don't have any news of this manuscript. And Patriarch Afram Barsom described this loss as a great scientific loss in the church, for the church and of the Syriac Church and its documentation. We don't know nothing about that, although Patriarch Afram Barsom transcribed, copied certain documents from this ancient script, and he published few documents of them. And he always mentioned that this collection lost. Also, the original pieces of the one that he transcribed, he also mentioned that also those were lost. To have an idea about this important manuscript, we can, because this manuscript was described, as we said, in the catalog of the Syriac manuscript in Tor Abdin, and here in this page we have the beginning of the description here. Means we are at least lucky that we have a almost full description of this manuscript, although it is lost. Now, while I was examining the Syriac manuscript collection here in the Oriental Institute Museum in Chicago, I found that there were 7-8 fragments, which originally belonged to the same manuscript, which were purchased actually by the same Patriarch Afram Barsom. At that time, he was the bishop of Lebanon, Syria, and Lebanon. We see this purchase occurred in July 1st, 1928. And actually, in 1928, Patriarch Afram Barsom, let's say Bishop Afram Barsom, was visiting United States at that time. And we know that he stayed in Chicago for 6 months, working and teaching or giving certain lectures in the Oriental Institute. It seems that while he was in Chicago, maybe he gave this collection to the Oriental Institute, and means we have them here. Not the entire manuscript, only few fragments of the lost manuscript. And this is a note issued by the Oriental Institute described the material purchased from Morseverus from Barson, the Metropolitan of Syria and Lebanon, by Dr. Martin Springling in July 1st, 1928. Not only the fragment, but also including 3 Syriac manuscripts. Now, my goal is to shed light and to give you an idea about this fragment, what we are talking here about. The first fragment, it is a record of episcopal sees of the Patriarchate of Antioch, known as Notitia Antiochiana. This document describes or records or lists the ecclesiastic administration of the Patriarchate of Antioch, the episcopal sees of the Patriarchate of Antioch. And this very important document because it belongs to late antiquity Syria and North Mesopotamia, means the Byzantine Mesopotamia, beside many other important aspects about this document. What is this exactly document? This is, as we mentioned, the register of episcopal sees of the Patriarchate of Antioch. It was composed in Greek, originally in Greek. The original document was composed in Greek around 570 at the end of the 6th century by Patriarch Anastasius I, the Chalcedonian Patriarch of Antioch. The Chalcedonian Patriarch of Antioch, Anastasius I. Through history, it's said that he is the one who composed such document, or it was composed during his days. It contains 12 great metropolitanates. This is the map of Syria. This is Turkey, Egypt, this is Anatolia, this is Syria, and describes the ecclesiastic geography of Syria and North Mesopotamia here. We have 12 great metropolitanates. There are autocephalous metropolitan, auxiliary bishops, sample bishoprics, and sovereign bishopric sees. The total around 151, 153. Although always the emphasis on 153 because this is a symbol number mentioned in the Gospel as a symbol of the Patriarchate or the number of the episcopal sees of Antioch. Now, the original Greek text was lost. We don't have the Greek original one, but it survived in later recensions in Greek, Syriac, Armenian, and Arabic. The oldest manuscript known, let's say, up to today, belongs to the 12th century. Before discovering the Syriac fragment, we didn't have a manuscript that contained this document, Notitia Antiochiana, before the 12th century. All the manuscripts are from the 12th century and later. However, by discovering this document from the middle of the 9th century, we are talking here about 300 years, almost 300, 400 years before the 12th century. This is the oldest known document about the record of episcopal see of the Patriarchate of Antioch. So far, this is the oldest and belongs to the middle of the 9th century. And this is very important. Why? Because there is a historian named Robert de Vries, a French scholar, used to work in the Vatican Library. He's well known for his work about the history of the Patriarchate of Antioch. According to Robert de Vries, the document Notitia Antiochena, or the register of the episcopacy of the Patriarch of Antioch, it's not authentic, doesn't belong to late antiquity, doesn't belong to Patriarch Anastasius I, and it is a forged document at the end of the 9th century. According to him, Notitia Antiochena is a fragment detached, extracted from a document known as Recapitulatio Tronorum. This document, this Latin document, Recapitulatio Tronorum, was composed in the second half of the 9th century, and according to Robert de Vries, someone extracted information, detached information from Recapitulatio Tronorum and created this document, Notitia Antiochena, and added the names into this new document, the Sovereign Bishopric Sees of Antioch. Means, in short, someone at the end of the 9th century created this document, the register of the episcopacy of Patriarch of Antioch, and claimed that it belongs to the 6th or the beginning of the 7th century. However, by discovering this document in a Syriac manuscript from the middle of the 9th century, means in the middle of the 9th century, already we have a Syriac translation which was based on earlier Syriac manuscript, which was based on earlier Greek original. And this shows that this document at least was composed in the 7th or the end of the 6th century. Why? Because we have it already in a manuscript that belonged to the 9th century, which was based on earlier Syriac translation, and that was based on even earlier Greek translation. Other aspect important in this document, we don't have time to mention the many aspects, but for example, I would like to mention these things here. In this document, we don't have only the names of the place names of the episcopal sees of Antioch in the Greek form, but also, in addition, we have the equivalent alternative Syriac place name or the local place name. And this is list of some of these places. In the document, we see the Greek original or the Greek translated in Syriac from one side. Also given the alternative Syriac place name, Suru, Tyr in Lebanon. Suru is Sur. Tarus, Tarsus. Aphamios, Aphamia. Bustrius, Busra. The copyist in the middle of the 9th century or even before, not just transliterated or not just recorded the original Greek names of the places, but also he tried to communicate, to explain, to update the readers of the actual place name in his own time. We see here kind of shift, kind of a cultural shift. The names, the Greek names of the city in Syria, means it was not enough just to mention or to refer the Greek names of the places in Syria, but also it was important to give the equivalent. Means we are in a shifting cultural process occurring in the region, and means that's naturally because we are here in the first or the early period of the Abbasid rule, and the Arabic language started to spread, and the Greek declined. Means this shows a shift. Another document will move to the second document, West Syriac Synodal Decisions. Among the fragments, we have this folio. In this folio, we have the decisions of a synod occurred according to analysis and examination. It most probably occurred at the beginning of the 8th century or the end of the 7th century. And we didn't know about this synod. And this synod contains important canons regarding certain issues that were not mentioned in the synod that occurred in the Syriac Orthodox Church later. And here I highlighted two of those canons, Canon 10 and Canon 15. We are talking here about 16 canons. The first 4 canons found in the previous folio, but unfortunately that previous folio lost. And as you see here, the upper right corner of the folio also lost. Because of that, we lost part of the first canon here. What survived clearly begins from here. This is a particular synod because of many aspects. For example, the language of the canon, it's more strict. The punitive aspect of the time frame of the punitive sentences in the canon decision here differs from the later synods. There are certain canons here were repeated in the later synods in the 8th, 9th century, 10th century, but some of them we don't find them. For example, here we have this is a table. This is the canons of our synod that we are talking about in this column. And here are the canons which are similar of what we have in this synod. And these are the canons which were issued by synods in the 4th century. Among these canons, Canon 10 and Canon 15 are particular. For example, Canon 10 we have a prohibition against eating from an animal sacrifice from one side. Means there is canon. The canon said that Christians should not eat meat during the Great Lent. Then we have also prohibition against eating from an animal that has been sacrificed to an idol. Debho, meat, a sacrificed animal in non-sacrificial act, like eating meat during the Great Lent. But the Dbiho in Syriac, highlighted here in red, this is Debho, meat, slaughter the animal, meat, and the Dbiho, which is a biblical and ecclesiastic term in Syriac that indicate a slaughtered animal in sacrificial occasion by Hanfe, by pagan. And we have to remember that this synod occurred at the beginning of the 8th century and of the 7th century. who are the Hanfi. And this canon, what's the background of this canon? Because also it coincides with a letter issued by Patriarch Athanasius II in the same period, prohibiting Christians from eating the sacrifices of the Muslims. From the history, we know after the Arab Muslim conquest in Syria and in the Middle East, there was a relative good relationship between the Christian, the Syriac, and the Muslims. But then the leadership of the church started to notice that certain women, Christian women, start to marry with Maghroy Muslims. And they noticed that people start to share the sacrifices of the Muslims. And the church was alarmed by that. Because of that, the church, like Patriarch Athanasius II, intervened and issued a decree to the bishops prohibiting marrying Muslim and prohibiting eating the meat of their sacrifices. And based on the study and examination of this document, which shows that belongs to that period, it seems that this canon reflects that aspect. It means that we don't have only a decree issued by the Patriarch regarding the matter of prohibiting eating the meat of the sacrifices of the Muslim, but also that aspect was inserted and issued in a canon, in a synod, prohibiting to do that. What is interesting that this canon, we don't have it later. Yes, it means Canon 2229 in Synod of Beth Batin mentions only that Christians should not eat meat during the Great Lent, but we don't have any mention of this canon that a Christian should not eat the meat of an animal sacrificed for an idol, dbiho, referring to what was occurring during that period regarding the Maghroy, the Muslim sacrifices. We don't have that anymore. Maybe to state such things was kind of an offense against the Muslim ritual, and there were consequences, and the Christian preferred not to mention that anymore. Means we can think also about that. Actually, also we can think that means maybe also this was one of the reasons that this synod was not mentioned ever among the list of synods that we know or found in other manuscripts, also in the history of the church. Even Barekmor, in his canon book Hudoye, doesn't mention this synod, like kind of hidden, kept in the dark, and by occasion we found it here. Another canon, interesting canon, number 15, that a Christian should not, priest should not feast celebration for angels. Priest in the church should not celebrate and do celebration for angels. They can do celebration for saints, but not for angels. This canon, we don't see it in any of the canons occurred later, at least in the 8th, 9th century, as it shows here, or even later. We don't have canon after that. We have it before in the Council of Laodicea in 363 before, but we don't have it after that. The third document, which I would like to shed light on it, is the famous chronicle we call the Chronicle of the history of Mor Gabriel, or the history of Qartmin, or the history of 819. It was published, edited, and translated into Latin by Chabot and by Barson himself in 1920. And here we have the publication of Barson and Chabot. And here we have the original. Means we have completely the lost history of the history of Qartamin, the history of Mor Gabriel, or the history of 819. And this small piece of the fragment here, I am showing partially part of the beginning of this chronicle. And this is important rediscovery, because now we can compare it to the edition of Barson and Chabot, and we see how much the edition of Barson and Chabot was accurate, and if we can improve it, or if they missed something. For example, here, if you notice, this is the edition of Chabot and Barson. These dots, it shows things that Barson and Chabot were not able to read. I highlighted in yellow the places where they were not able to read, and in red that they read it in wrong way. And now we can think about re-editing this text. This is here, we have an example, and also I would like to give other examples. Let's move here, an example. In this history, which was composed around 819, because it ends 819, here we have a notice about Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, and the beginning of Islam. And it says here that Muhammad, in the year 932, Muhammad, the first king from the Arab, appeared, reigned, and he made the first sacrifice. And according to Barson, and he made the Arab eat from it. Means linguistically and in the sense, it doesn't sound right. But by discovering the original manuscript, now we can fix that. How we can fix that? It's not Awkhel, it's Awbel. It's not Khe here, it is the letter of B, which are very similar. Why Barson wrote Awkhel? He made them eat when it should be, and he led the Arabs. It's led, leading, to lead, not to make them eat. In this part, I try to enlarge and as much as possible to show. If you see here from the first look, you see it as K, as the letter of K. But with more examination, the part of the B, this part here, it's faint. It is very faint, but it is there. This is B. The upper part of the B became so faint, to the level that it starts to look as K. But we have here the continuation of the B. Now to be this also to be able to read that, and this goes, for example, to this manuscript here, this fragment here. Someone will say how it's possible to read the manuscript like this text. It's so difficult. It's covered with this dark kind of a blue candle. It was really difficult, and the best way is not to read the text like that straight, But to read the folio like that, with a magnifier and a light, makes the script reflect uh, the color of the script, and you can see it clearly as B. Hopefully I'm still sharing the document here. Now, what changes now? Instead, and he made them eat, the translation will be, in the year 932, Muhammad, the first king from the Arab ring, and he made the first sacrifice and led the Arabs contrary to their usual habit. And he led the Arabs contrary to their usual habit. And from this point, the enumeration of their years begins. Led could indicate a conduct, managing a low aspect, changing their habit from a low aspect, or leading them physically from a place to place, and maybe it coincides with what was mentioned later here. From this point, the enumeration of their years begins. What's the year of the Arab? Hijra. Hijra means moving from place to place, leading the Arabs contrary to their usual habit, leading them from place to place, or conducting them, or managing them. Means it's awbel, not awkhel. Here, for example, we have this emptiness that Barson was not able to read, but now we are able to read. Another example, this is Barson. We have these many empty places, dots, that Barson was not able to read it, and here we have a wrong reading. For example, Malco, here is talking about King Anastasius. King Anastasius, in the year 829, Anastasius the king, the Byzantine king, and Malco Gabro or Gaboro, Malco Gabro, but it's not clear. But this is not Gabro, Gabro, and we see here clearly the hair and the dot, Gabro, the hair and the dot, which means not a man, but the husband of Anastasius, the king, the husband of whom? We see here D of Te Olaf, which is part of the name Theodora, which in the next paragraph her name was mentioned exactly by Te Olaf den Law. In the year 829, Anastasius the king and the husband of Theodora died, and king, here we have king, Justin or Justinian, and I will explain why Justin or Justinian ruled in his place, and he took his wife, again, وهفاغ وأمليخ ونسبه لفه, and he took his wife, the wife of whom? Means Justine or Justinian. Justinian took his wife, and took his wife, the wife of whom? The husband of Theodora. Justinian took the wife of Anastasius, Theodora, and returned to support Al-Makhrez, the Synod of Chalcedon, and began Ushari to persecute the Orthodox people. Now, someone will means the normal question here will be, but Theodora was not the wife of Anastasius, and after Anastasius we have Justine, and it's Justinian after Justine was the husband of Theodora. Means we see a kind of confusion. Now, this confusion probably comes from the Chronicle of Sergio Dionysius or the Chronicle of Zucnin, because in that chronicle, the name of King Anastasius was followed immediately by Justinian, which there is kind of gap, and maybe the chronicle of our chronicle here fell in that gap, and he used Justinian after Anastasius. Justinian after Anastasius means should be the husband of Theodora. Another explanation, this could also shows the effort of the Syriac Orthodox in that period to explain the story of Theodora. Always there was this controversy about the origin of Theodora. According to Byzantine sources, Theodora was presented in low status. Her origin was presented in low status. For example, we have a historian says that Theodora was working in circus before meeting Justinian, who took her as a wife. However, in the Syriac sources, because Theodora supported the Syriac Orthodox in that period, and she was their major supporter. For example, Michael the Syrian in the 11th, 12th century, he presented her in very beautiful, he portrayed her in very sainthood, holy presentation as the daughter of a priest and in very beautiful and holy aspect as a saint. However, the effort of presenting Theodora and her role in the Syriac Church goes much before Michael the Syrian. For example, Patriarch Kyriakos in the same period of our Chronicle presented Theodora in very different way, and he gave her a special role, and he created those events that actually, when we compare them to the history, sometimes they don't work. In his biography of Severus of Antioch, Patriarch Kyriakos wrote the biography of Severus of Antioch. In this biography, he decorated and presented and portrayed Theodora in very special way. And here in our Chronicle, it seems that the Chronicle, because Anastasius was big supporter of the Syriac Orthodox Church, the non-Chalcedonian, and he joined Theodora to him as his wife, the queen, an Orthodox king with an Orthodox queen, before Justinian takes her as a queen. First, to explain her origin, that she was a queen, she was an Orthodox, she was the wife of an Orthodox king, according to the non-Chalcedonian point of view, and Anastasius took her as her wife. Means the Syriac kind of legitimization of the non-Chalcedonian community and portraying their hero in an Orthodox way. An interpretation. Another lacuna here, another emptiness. And in the year of his ruling, someone went to the land of Al-Khabur and Balikh. Who went there? We can get that from the edition of Barson, but examining the manuscript, we know it was Munzer Tayoye, Munzer of the Tayoye, of the Arab, who came and he came to the land of Habura and Balikh. An example here, see here, we have in this yellow the emptiness, the dots that Barson was not able to read. But now, since we have the original, we can read that. It talks here about a monk appeared in the region of Mosul in the 8th century, and according to the sources, he started to preach strange teachings to the teaching of the church, and he was expelled from the region of Tikrit and Mosul, and he came to the region of Mesopotamia, Upper Mesopotamia, let's say, and he started to lead astray the people around him. Then we have things here that we can't read. But here now we know he was despising the monks because they were not eating meat. We can read it here. Lo ochlim besro ashnath, because they were not eating meat. His falsity spread in. Torabdin. We can't read that in Barsom, but since we have the original, now we can read it. بوسار والدايروي بهويدلو أخليم بسرو عشناف بين طايوثه بغاو ترعبدين. They were not eating meat. His falsity spread in Torabdin, and especially and mostly in Hah. It's the major center in Torabdin. It was the center of Torabdin, the bishoprics center in Torabdin. Hah, where he misled some people, and those who went after him, they were dispersed. We can't read that in Afram Barson, but here we can see that. And this is important information because it sheds light on certain things occurred in Torabdin. That this Marutha had a basis, had followers in Torabdin, especially in Hah. Now, who's mentioning that? Who's writing about that? The Chronicle. Who's the Chronicle? Was a monk from the monastery of Qartamin. Who's writing this? A monk from the monastery of Qartamin. And Qartamin in that period, I mean the monastery of Mor Gabriel, in the 8th century, 7th, 8th, 9th century, start to raise. Mor Gabriel begin to become the center, the ecclesiastic center in Torabdin. And here we have this kind of looking in bad way toward Hah as a place who this heretical monk, let's say, had followers. Kind of competition between Mor Gabriel, the rising center, and Hah, the old center. Another document, we move to another document. Among the synods in the Syriac Orthodox Church, we have a synod called the Synod of Araka or Canonicus. Occurred around 817, 818 in that period. In certain manuscripts, we have the edict, the synodal letters of this synod, but we don't know which bishops who were there. Barson edited the names of those bishops, but he didn't edit and translate the synodal letter found in our fragment of this synod. He edited partially only the names of the bishops. Now, by discovering this fragment, we have part of the synodal letters and we have completely the names of the bishops. And when we compare the names of the bishops published by Barson and the names of the bishop as are found here, we see there are a few mistakes occurred by Barson by, for example, calling certain bishops as metropolitans or calling certain metropolitans as bishops. But the major issues, what this synod is about, to understand what I would like to mention. In that period, in the 9th century, there was a problem, liturgical problem, and there was division in the church. Some people centered around monastery called the monastery of Baroyo, located near Aleppo, that area, refused the policy of the patriarch and his decision regarding the liturgy. And when the patriarch Kyriakos died, the new patriarch and when the bishop met in this synod and they decided to find a peace and reconciliation, they did this edict, and actually even the monks and the bishops of that monastery were present in this synod, and we had kind of peace. Now Barson, he published this, the names of the bishops, but he changed the tone in his editing and translation. He changed the tone of the signature. In this synod, the bishop will sign. For example, will say, I, means I, the Bishop Habib, from the monastery of Gubo Baroyo, obeyed the decision and signed what the synod decided. Afram Barsom used the word ata'tu in his Arabic translation, obeyed, submitted totally, kind of submitting, obeying, this kind of negative tone. But the original document doesn't mention that, doesn't use that language. Barsom changed the tone, changed the language, not according to what we found in the original document. Here is, in front of you, you have a comparison. In the original will say, I, Habib, a bishop from the monastery of Gubu Baroya, consented. I accepted, like all the bishops, these decisions. I, Yohanun, ecumenical presbyter from the same monastery, accepted the above-mentioned decisions. Or here, we, Georgi and Yosef deacons from the same monastery, we truly accept and sign the same language of the other bishops. There is no opposition or means it is the same language. But Barsom uses we obey and submit and we obey. But now, since we have the original, we can at least re-edit the text. Another difference. Now here we have a comparison between this is the translation of the original fragment that we found, and this is the letter of the synod, the decision of the synod, according to the fragment here, and according to what the Chronicle of Michael the Syrian presents. Michael the Syrian, the patriarch of the Syriac Orthodox Church, in his Chronicle, he reported the letter of this synod in the 12th century. Now, when we compare the fragments here from the 9th century and the Chronicle of Michael the Syrian, we see a noticeable difference in the synodal letter. Here it is much shorter. Here it's much longer. In the original here, let's say in the 9th century, which is about 300-400 years before Michael the Syrian, 300 years before Michael the Syrian, we don't have this part, and we don't have this part. Those parts, it seems, were added later, and they were not part of the original document. Even Michael the Syrian, when he reports this letter of the Synod of Araka 818, at the end of the letter, he gives a notice. He says that this is what I found, but I found in different copy, a different version, and it's worth to compare them. Means even Michael the Syrian was kind of, he expressed his doubt or kind of contradiction or difference, let's say difference between the letter that he's reporting from certain source and from another source that he found. And actually, when we compare with this fragment, we see difference. Those two were not found there. This is just a small effort to shed light on this collection of a fragment, and it is important always to compare the edited and the translated document with the original. And editing and publishing a historical document, it's not an easy effort. You need accuracy in the editing. You need to translate or to edit the text as faithful as much as possible. And when you don't have the original one, it's a problem because we can't compare. And this is good occasion to re-edit and republish the things that were published by Afram Barson, but in more scientific and academic publication. Thank you very much. Father Thomas, hopefully you are hearing me. Yeah, you are muted, Father Abouna Thomas.
Thank you, Abouna Sharbel. This was a wonderful presentation, a very interesting looking into our church history. This session also helped us to realize how it is difficult. How difficult it is to read the ancient manuscripts. Really, a great job, Abouna, you guys are doing, and the people who are working to uplift the history and everything. It's a great job, Abouna. Before we wind up the session, we have some questions from our viewers. With your permission, shall I show the questions, Abouna?
Yes. I don't see them in front of me, but you can read.
Now, I think now you can see it.
Right. From Canon 35 of Laodicea, here we have, which Abouna mentioned about angel. A Christian must not forsake the church of God and go away and invoke angel and gather assembly, which things are forbidden. If therefore anyone shall be found, is there a question here? I don't see question. Right. I close this one. Yeah, means I don't know exactly what is the question here, but if I'm understanding right, yes, the canon 15 of our synod, the unknown synod, canon 15, is similar to canon 35 of Council of Laodicea. This is right, as also you see in the table here. But later, we don't have, means that canon, we don't have it later. No, we have it before, but we don't have later. And maybe this also shows that the habit and the celebrations of the church changed with time. Yes.
There is one more question, Abouna.
This from Malfono Afram Ishaq, concerning the manuscript of Barekmor fragment. Are there extra texts which were not transcribed by Afram Barson in his catalog? Moreover, Barson is one of his archival letters. I found the canon of Bar Wahib Synod that he covered with his friend, which I have edited and included for our forthcoming Syriac volume on the West Syriac Synod. Can you tell me, please, if these canons are also part of this surviving fragment from the Barekmor unique manuscript? We don't have in the fragment survive. We don't have the canon of Bar Wahib Synod, because Bar Wahib Synod was occurred much later. We are talking 13th, 14th century, if I am right. Yeah, we don't have Bar Wahib. And extra texts which were not transcribed by Afram Barson, yes, which is the synod. The synod here, the unknown synod, was not transcribed by Barson. And what is interesting, that even Barson, when he listed item by item the original manuscript of Barekmor, didn't mention this synod. I don't know why. He mentioned the topic before this synod, and he mentioned the topic after this synod. Means I am assuming that he saw this synod, but he didn't include it in his list of description of the manuscript. I don't know why. It is mystery that this synod was not mentioned anywhere, and when Afram Barson, who didn't skip anything, and when he saw this one, he didn't even mention it. He just skipped it. He didn't even mention it positively or even negatively. It is not there. Hopefully, I answered Malfono Afram about his question.
It's from another question, Abouna.
And what is the most recent example of disciplinary canons in the Syriac tradition? It means the canon changed with the time. For example, here, one important aspect of this synod, the time frame of the punitive sentence. If someone does something wrong, will be punished by 30 days or by 1 year or by 3 years, not going to the church, not receiving the Eucharist. For example, this is the time frame. What is interesting, the time frame start to be loosened in the successive synod. If we are talking here about 6 years, for example, regarding these transgressions, this time frame was reduced to 3 years or 1 year, or it was not even mentioned, and it became linked to the authority of the bishop, according what the bishop will see for the best and the benefit of his community. The tone, the language, the vocabulary, the form of the canon start to be loosened, means start to be more tolerable. And this is very important. Why? Because according to examination, which I published just recently in Oriens Christianos of this synod, it reflects in many other examples the work and the language and the character of Jacob of Edessa. Jacob of Edessa was very strict to the level that he had even a problem with his patriarch regarding the law and the time frames and the implication of the laws, to the level that he took the book of the canon and burned in front of the patriarch and the bishop, saying that if you don't respect this canon, let's just burn it. He was very strict, rigid character. And the canon of this synod reflects that between two brackets. I don't know if I'm using rightly the English term, like rigidity, severity, strictness. The language of this canon coincides with the one of Jacob of Edessa, and this helps us to know the date of composing and occurring of this synod. Yes, there was difference. Things changed, loosened, and things wouldn't mention after that.
To connect that question, there is one more question, Abouna.
Were any discipline canons adopted in this later discipline? Yes, yes. We see disciplinary canons adapted in most of the synod, but without some of the canon preserve the time frame, but loosening it, making it easier, and some not even mentioning, means there is discipline, but not with the strictness of this canon. Let's say things were going from strict into easy and easy and easy.
Abouna, there is one more question. I will read it. In some places, we don't build churches to angels still. What is the official church view about building churches in the name of angels?
Sorry, Abouna, I didn't hear you.
Abouna, it's a question. In some places, we don't build churches to angels still. What is the official stand of our church?
Sorry, yeah. Can you repeat, or can you write the question, or repeat it, or yeah?
Some places. Can you hear me, Abouna?
Yes, some places.
Some places we don't build churches
to
the name of the angels.
Right.
What is the official stand of our church?
Right. Nowadays, if you look to our calendar, we have celebration of Saint Michael, we have celebration of Saint Gabriel, and actually also we have in the tradition, like we have the celebration of Saint Michael, and even through the history of the church, yes, we celebrate feast to the angels, Gabriel and Michael. But there is something interesting in one of the manuscripts around like 14th century, 13th, 14th century, in the calendar, manuscript of a calendar of the feast of the Syriac Orthodox Church. When it comes to celebration, the feast of the angels, in this manuscript calendar, there is kind of note. The scribe put a note saying that means kind of we have to be careful because the angels are not, they don't have body. Means there is kind of difference between angel and saint. Saint who lived on this earth, he has a body, died, and is in heaven, and we ask his the veneration. But angels are kind of particular. Means kind of like questioning: do we venerate them? Do we celebrate them, or we don't? Kind of questioning in a note, in a manuscript. This is in the Middle Age, late Middle Age. But yes, we celebrate. Right. Michael.
Okay. I think there is one more. Last question is there.
Right. May we expect a future book based on translations of these fragments? Just recently, the Notitia Antiochiana, the record episcopal of, actually, I have it here. All right. This document was already published in Oriens Christianus. Is already published in Oriens Christianus here with English translation. We have it already here, English translation. And this document is also published very recently, the last year, in the same journal, German journal, Oriens Christianus. But now I am in the process, means I finished the editing and translation of the history of Qartamin by re-editing the text with English translation and submitted to the publisher to be published as an article, including this piece of synod, the letter of Synod of Araka. Yes, it's not in book, in two different articles.
Okay, and for our viewers, you can see in the bottom, you can see the scrolling. There you can find a website where we can see the books and the articles published by Reverend Abouna Iskandar, and so you can visit that website also. And also in the site of Gorgias Press, you can see many articles published by Abouna also. Okay, thank you. I believe that's the last of our question for today. Thank you so much, Abouna, for joining us today. It was a blessing for all our viewers to hear from you. May our Lord continue to bless your service for our church and for the kingdom of our Savior. We hope to hear from you again. And once again, on behalf of our team, Urho, and all our viewers, we extend our thanks and gratitude to Abouna Iskandar, and for our Syriac people, we say for our Abouna Sharbel Iskandar. Thank you so much once again.
Abouna, thank you to you and Abouna Renjan, Abouna Renjan, and for Urho, and for the entire team. And always it is difficult, means we don't want to mention name, then we'll forget another name, but I am thankful for everybody, and especially for Urho.
Maybe you are talking about Dr. Jobin Chako.
Dr. Jobin and Brother Marion, and many other people. There is a big team working for Urho.
Yes.
And Urho, it's particular. It is important because Urho not only focuses on the church aspect, means not only on the matters of the church, or like the churchy things, but also on the scholarly. And this is what we always needed. The ritual, the doctrine, the ritual things of our church are very important, the liturgy, but also we need to shed light also on the scholarly effort, which Urho is doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abouna, and thank you all our viewers who joined in with us today on Urho the Way. Thank you so much. All glory to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. Amen.
And Barekmor Abouna. Thank you.
Thank you.